You're tuned into the Unnecessary Harm podcast, where we drill down on issues of substance use and its cultural impact. Your host, Shane Varcoe, Executive Director of the Delgado Institute, with over 40 years experience in youth and community work and a passion for building resilience.
Hey, welcome back to the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Good to have you with us again. Today's guest is a rock star in the world of drug policy and practice, with at least one very unique CV filler. He has advised 3 US presidents on drug policy, unparalleled in the arena. His substantive portfolio is way too big to table here, but his now global influence is in being at the forefront of evidence-based cannabis reform. A prolific author and researcher with PhD affiliated with University of Florida's Division of Addiction Medicine, including 3 primary books as an author, in addition to co-editing at least 1 academic volume. Reefer Sanity, 7 Great Myths About Marijuana, published in 2013 and second edition 2018. Smokescreen, What the Marijuana Industry Doesn't Want You to Know, 2021. Great work, read both of them. And the latest offering, release, One Nation Under the Influence, America's Deadly Drug Habit and How We Can Overcome It, released in September this year. And it's another one of the works that really addresses the serious public health issue that is substance use in our culture today. He's also co-editor of the academic book Marijuana and Contemporary Health. He's a frequent media commentator, and today's been part of that prolifically. We'll get to that later on, including TEDx talks and expert witness on cannabis policy and drug reform internationally. He's also, importantly, co-founder and president of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, or SAM, and one of the most recognised voices challenging both the war for drugs and its big gun commercial cannabis. From the halls of government to university research centres, he's championed a third way, one that prioritises public health, protects our most vulnerable, and refuses to let politics override science. Dr. Kevin Sabet, welcome to the Unnecessary Harm podcast.
Thanks for having me, Shane. It's an honor. Thank you.
It's been a big day for you, and we'll get into that a bit later on. A lot going on in the US, not least the recent release of the executive order of the WMD, fentanyl being the WMD, weapon of mass destruction, and of course the pending rescheduling of cannabis. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. I think they're important subject matters. But our listeners down here, a lot of people know who you are. The name is, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your skirt. The name is synonymous with drug policy worldwide, particularly the cannabis issue, and Sam has been an incredible resource and asset to global policymakers, anyone from our side of the fence, certainly the preventionists, the demand reduction folk and the recovery folk. It's invaluable. It's just fantastic, and we love the SAM platform. Use it, engage with it, and we've actually got you to Australia here as a Delgado Institute previously.
Yeah,
and of course, you've spoken to a number of inquiries on cannabis in Australia too as an expert witness. That's fantastic. So the familiarity with a lot of people will be there, but a lot of our listeners, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, may not have the same level of insight. So I just want to give them an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. Now, I understand your work in policy space started when you were in diapers, right? Is that correct?
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, look, I used to think, man, when I talked to you, I think, gee, you look really super young for a 65-year-old. And then I found out I thought, wow, how does he do that? I literally thought that, and then I found out, no.
I'm never going to let you live that down.
I know. I thought, dude. And then I find out he's nowhere near 50 yet. I thought, wow, what's going on with that? So that's an incredible starting point for us. I think that's really good. Tell us about your journey into activism and how that resulted in you becoming, for want of a better word, drug czar for 3 presidents. Give us an insight on that.
Well, the legalizers have aged me, as you can see. So that's probably what it is, all the work there. So I, this was, again, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. It was great to be down under with you many years ago. Hope to come back. I'm having coffee right now. It's not as good as the Melbourne coffee I know that we had. That was very good.
Giddy up. Absolutely.
But and also my condolences for obviously the horrendous attack on Bondi Beach that just happened a few days ago. It's really just unbelievable what's happening in this world on so many fronts. So just really, really crazy. But
with Thanksgiving,
no, of course. I got involved really by accident. I don't drink alcohol. I let alone I've never used drugs. My family never has. I've never even seen alcohol at my house except when new neighbors came over to drop a bottle of wine. And my parents were, kind enough not to tell them they didn't drink. They just kind of hid it away, and I don't know what they ended up doing with it, giving it to someone else or something. But that, it just wasn't a thing, and my family really came to America in the 1960s, way before I was born, because I remember I'm not 65.
I deserve that. I deserve that.
They came over, really for economic and religious liberty, and then, they basically, while they were in America, they saw their country overnight turn into something they had never seen before during the Iranian Revolution, when, obviously, authoritarian and totalitarianism, took over. So we were living a typical life in the 1980s in beautiful life in Southern California. When I was a teenager in the 90s, I began seeing my friends, some of them use alcohol and marijuana, and some of them really had a difficult time. And at the same time, I was sort of elected. It wasn't something you ran for, but it was something that people would write your name in for. So you didn't know that it was coming, but it was, name the 4 kids that you would like, that you could confide in. They were doing like this new program where 8th graders could talk to fellow 8th graders about their problems, which is interesting. I think these days it wouldn't pass, any regulations. We were like, sort of psychiatrists at 8th grade. I don't think these days, for liability reasons, they will allow that to happen. But
the program does exist. It still exists in Australia, but it's a different format. Yep.
Yeah.
Go.
So anyway, I was written in as someone that people felt comfortable talking to, and I started talking to a lot of people I knew, some people I didn't know very well, but a common denominator was marijuana. And, I thought this program was very necessary. And then all of a sudden, our school board wanted to cut the program, actually. And they wanted to cut all counseling and things like that. They thought it should only be with parents. And I was very upset by that, because this was actually free money from the federal government. It didn't really cost the school district anything. And so I advocated for these programs. And so essentially what happened was, I advocated for these programs, and we ended up winning. And I realized, how important drug and alcohol programs were. And then there was a newspaper that students could write in for my county, for the jurisdiction of the county.
Yeah.
And that newspaper was about drug and sort of youth issues. And I like to write. So I started writing about my experiences for this newspaper. Next thing I knew, there was a ballot initiative in California in 1996 when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And that ballot initiative.
How old are you? 16. Yeah, go. Yep.
Right. So I was 16 in 1996. And that was when there was a ballot initiative to legalize what they called medical marijuana. Now, I have had cancer in my family. I do have cancer in my family. So I was sympathetic, because I thought, well, anything that could help if it's medicine. But then I read the details of what it was. And what it was, as you know, it was marijuana for any illness for which you think it provides relief. There's no prescription. There's no doctor oversight. There was nothing. It was de facto legalization. And I started researching, who's behind this? Is it doctors? Is it cancer doctors? Is it real patients? And the people behind it I saw was actually big money billionaires whose goal was to legalize marijuana, but they were going to put the word medical before the word marijuana. So that they could make it more palatable for people.
Correct.
And I saw that, and I couldn't believe it. And to be honest, it radicalized me. Their deceit radicalized me. And I realized that this was ridiculous. And they were exploiting vulnerable people, patients, their families, for their own gain. And that really angered me as well. So all these things were happening at once. We were sort of fighting the school board and the medical marijuana thing. And then I became a youth spokesperson in the state of California against medical marijuana, against this initiative. And a lot of people thought, well, it's not going to pass. No one's going to vote for marijuana. Well, it did pass. It passed 44%. People were okay with it. And we predicted what was going to happen. And so, then I went to undergrad at Berkeley, which I started an anti-drug group there, which was, I like to say it was like starting the coalition for a wine-free France.
That's right. I was going to say, Berkeley, pick your spot.
Right, exactly. And I remember meeting with the councilman there my second day of school, and he thought that I was going to talk to him about opening more pot shops. And I was actually talking to him about how we can close the pot shops. And he was shocked and upset. He was an old hippie from Berkeley. He was the councilman at that time already for 20 years or so. He was the area where the students were. So very, very on the left side of the spectrum, of political spectrum. And I realized that, I wasn't in Orange County anymore, even though, of course, Orange County was also hostile because on the other side, you had libertarians who wanted to legalize. So you had I went from one extreme
another animal in the game.
Right. I went from one extreme libertarian to the other extreme. And I realized that I don't really fit neatly into either of those buckets as well. And here I am at age 20. And then there was that was the time of the big epidemic of ecstasy, MDMA, club drugs. So my friends and I would go to clubs in San Francisco, which was the big city near Berkeley, of course. And we would go to clubs and stand in line and pass out postcards with brains scans of your brain on ecstasy.
Brilliant.
Yep. And we thought we were just doing something that was a good service, but it started to get a lot of notice. And I got contacted one day from the White House. Of course, I thought it was a fake call. I didn't think it was a real call.
As you do, as a 20-year-old.
Exactly. Definitely thought it was a fake call. And it wasn't. It was the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And they wanted to say, hey, we love what you're doing. Can you please come to the White House this summer and work for us as a paid researcher? And of course, I jumped on that. And that's where I met Barry McCaffrey, General McCaffrey, who was the U.S. director. And, I still didn't think this could be a profession. I mean, this was sort of like randomly, I felt happening one thing after another. I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to become a judge, actually, is what I wanted to do. Okay. And so didn't even know what a profession this could be. And basically now I'm telling you my whole life story, but I did that, ended up going to Oxford for post-grad, got another call when I was at Oxford, hey, come to the White House in 2002 to be a speechwriter for the Drug Czar's office. And so I said, great. For me, it was important because I saw a lot of my friends going to war this was after 9/11. And I was always conflicted about going to Oxford when they were going to Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And this was a way to also serve my country in a different way. So I gladly went back to Washington. I did that, and then I got sick of that, went back to Oxford, like back and forth, got my PhD in social policy, still not thinking this would be necessarily a career. I thought I probably will go into academia of some sort. And then I was asked again to come back in the beginning of the Obama administration to do drug policy, and I realized, okay, I think this is really a sign. Now, third time I'm being asked, I need to stick with it, and I love doing it. And I did that for 2.5 years, and then I left to start SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. I was really in need of kind of more independence, and I wrote a book called Reefer Sanity as well at that time. And the rest is history, I guess, since the last time.
And we'll talk into that. We'll talk into that because that's really important. That's a great little snapshot, and I think life history it's probably that's an overreach, but I think it's really important that people get a narrative, a clear narrative, and again, this is not some sort of crusading individual. This is a young person who's watching his community unravel, and particularly his peers unravel, and seeing it from I'm going to use the word carefully here, clean perspective. There's this kind of like you're an outlier. It's kind of like, well, I'm looking in on this and going, this isn't helpful. I mean, this is not part of my world, but I'm looking at this choice, it's apparent choice of conduct, of engagement, of participation. That's not in my world. And say, okay, well, this is what they do, young people do. But then you start to see the unraveling, and you're going, hey, whoa, this isn't good. And stepping in, again, for our young listeners, who there is a number of them that do chime in, saw this with Bertha Madras. Her initiation to her space was the same deal as a 16-year-old who get an opportunity to write a paper and decides to connect into this space in a completely different way that she wasn't expecting to do, and making a remarkable difference. And I think that's another indicator to the demographic, this younger demographic. This is culture shifting behaviour. Yeah. This is culture shifting dynamics at work here. And Kevin wasn't the genius at 16. He wasn't at grade 8 at 12. He's a young man who connects, a young man who cares, a young man who sees an alternative and brings it to the table. And I think in a culture where peer pressure, negative peer pressure, rules so tyrannically, this is a really powerful little example. I just wanted to labour that point for a minute. Thank you for that, Kevin. I really, really value that. So let's talk about the genesis of Sam.
One thing I learned that I think, just if I can say this, that I think is, in line with resilience and the issues that you talk about, is, I learned I had to create opportunities for myself. I mean, these things happen because, I did something and then they created an opportunity. They didn't just happen because I sat back and, relied on my good looks and charm. That wasn't what happened. So It really was this idea of creating opportunities. And I believe everybody could do that.
Absolutely. And I think that's another important distinction here in this space is that in a culture of where we look for the freebie, we look for the passivity, or the passive role or the passivity position is an easier one to adopt in a culture. And it's almost a soft bigotry that generates in all sorts of demographics and cultures. But so once you step into a space and take advantage of an opportunity or create an opportunity, I think that both are valuable, and all of a sudden things light up, because this is, I think, a very famous Australian multi-billionaire who was just a side issue, but was illiterate at the age of 19, could barely read, write his name. He learned to read, write, went to school. He used to say, I used to fight on street corners, now I own them. And he said, one of his statements was, money is not your greatest asset. Time is your greatest asset. Time is opportunity looking for a cause. Now, when those two collide, something positive happens, and you're a living example of that as a 12, 13, 14, 16, 20-year-old. So, just buy into that, guys. But getting back to Sam, I really want to explore this a little bit for those who are not as familiar as we are. The genius behind this is really good. It's a seminal partnership with one of the Kennedys, I think early days, or who himself was a recovered drug addict. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Patrick Kennedy's still extremely involved. I text him almost every day. Beautiful. He's the son of the late Ted Kennedy, who was really considered the lion of the U.S. Senate. He, of course, also ran for president himself in the U.S., but never quite made it. But, was kind of the third brother, along with John, of course, the president, and then RFK, whose life was obviously tragically cut very, very short as well. So Teddy was the big senator, big presence, big person in many ways. And, Patrick grew up in that privilege and that wealth and around, easy access to drugs, parents not around much because they were
that's
busy.
A big deal, isn't it? That's a big thing to focus on.
Parents being Kennedys, And, was able in his addiction to hide it for so long, and, was a member of the U.S. Congress during having his addiction. And then really it was something that had to happen to him, where he had a very public car crash in the Capitol that woke him up to this. And he's been now, sober for, more than probably about 15 years. Yeah. And he's been married for that long, completely changed his life. He has 5 children now, married. I mean, completely different from when he was a member of Congress. And, we had met during the discussion about healthcare in the U.S., because we both worked hard to make sure that if we were going to expand healthcare, that it covered people with addictions to get treatment. And he was an advocate for that. And then when I left the White House and marijuana was becoming normalized, legalized, he called me and said, Kevin, as you know, I'm in recovery, and this is going to threaten people in recovery. This is awful for us. What can we do?
Very good.
And we decided we needed to do something and work together. So we launched this group, SAM. And, to this very day, he's extremely involved, extremely passionate about it.
Wonderful. Yeah, and the project's taken off. It's not just national in the US, but it's global. And we see, although they may not be positioned globally everywhere in the world, but it's known and engaged globally. And I think that's the point. And again, this initiative, again, from an individual who sees, it takes an opportunity, makes an opportunity, because there's an interest in public health and public safety and public well-being. And I want to be a contributor to that. I want to see this shift away from the destructive elements that are being presented in the culture. And again, Sam is in the vanguard of this space, and I'm really grateful for that. The reason I'm labouring that, listeners, is because this is important. You know, I mean, for a lot of people who are not in the drug space or, you know, heavily attached to it, you don't quite appreciate the magnitude of an organisation like SAM and what it has done and is doing. And not always it's a win. We're going to talk about some of the wins, and we're going to talk about some of the battles that are still in play.
Sure.
Hey, before we continue, we want to highlight an excellent cousin podcast you should definitely check out. Pathways to Prevention with Dave Clausen. Dave brings incredible, proactive and protective insights that really complement the work we're doing here at UHP. That's Pathway number 2, Prevention. Make sure you subscribe and give it a listen. Now, back to UHP.
On Tuesday, November 11th, 2025, prominent pro-pot publication Marijuana Moment posted the following headline: Senate rejects attempt to save hemp industry from THC ban in key spending bill. The bill overrides the regulatory framework of several states, cancels the collective decision of hemp consumers, and destroys the livelihoods of hemp farmers. And well, that was a spin anyway. This spin sounds oh so damning, but this is a huge win for not only public health, but society, communities and families across the US. I think that's important. And Sam was one of the key actors, stakeholders in this, and seeing this win. Walk us through some of that long fight. I know that was on the table for a long time. We were following it. Just walk us through some of the salient moments and some of the key wins in that.
Sure. So it was huge because what happened was there was this agricultural bill that was passed in 2018, and it was passed with this hemp provision because the idea was, let's allow hemp farmers to be able to compete for the hemp industry. Now, of course, the hemp industry in the US and everywhere is very small. It's a niche industry, and it's very cheaply produced in Canada and China. And so the US always imported hemp. That was legal to import hemp, but not to grow it ourselves. And so these farmers said, well, you should allow us to grow it. We should be able to do it. And so they said, okay, we'll give you a try. Now, what they didn't do, though, is there was a loophole. And so this loophole allowed the hemp to be manipulated so that they could extract an intoxicating substance from the hemp plant, which is a cousin of marijuana. And so all of a sudden you had rogue chemists and lab operators, etc.,
correct,
extracting the very dangerous synthetic marijuana. And it was marijuana made in a lab from different kinds of chemical structures. And so this was basically allowed to be sold all over the
convenience stores, petrol stations, everywhere.
Gas, petrol stations, etc. Terrible, and 12-year-olds were getting them.
Yep.
And so we worked very hard, and a big industry was growing, and they were even convincing conservative, Republicans like the governor of Texas. So we were very, very, adamant that this needs to be repealed, and so we worked very hard. And so what we did was we, lobbied the Senate. We worked very hard to get this basically into some kind of bill that had to pass. Well, the government coming back into session had to pass, and it had to go through, it had to be signed. And so we got it into that, and so now they have a 1-year waiting period, but these are going to be completely illegal in a year, in this November. Of course, the industry is working overtime to reverse that, but we have them in a pretty good place right now. So it was a huge victory after 7 years of trying to correct this, to actually get this through.
No, and it was brilliant, and we were following that because we understood and saw, not just from news feeds and whatnot that they're presented, but some of the data and evidence that was coming through. This was again another Trojan horse, and the marijuana pro legalisers, including Normal and the big pushes behind this, they saw this as another opportunity to addict the public, and again the addiction for profit sector love addiction for profit products because it's a guaranteed customer base for life, or as short as that may be, and that's why it's a powerful win for public health, powerful win for personal health and community well-being, which I think is a really big deal. And that's just one of the elements and one of the factors that Sam brings to the table, and along with many other groups that we're lobbying with you, of course. But yeah, you're one of the key lead agencies in that, so that's really important. Now, you obviously, cannabis is the big issue, or marijuana is the big issue, and that's obviously the primary brief of Sam, but there's also other agencies attached to that: drug policy development, your parents, what is it? What is it? Advocate network, and your different groups that are in the orbit of. That's right. They're around the orbit of Sam, which are really good. So you're working to shift the whole community away from not just cannabis, but all the substances that are creating the havoc and disruption and disintegration of culture. And part of that is, I just want to touch on this, the fentanyl issue, not your primary wheelhouse, I know that, but it's part of the deal. And of course, your president, the POTUS, Mr. Trump, recently signed an executive order, very recently, we've just published it in our WRD News, on fentanyl being a weapon of mass destruction. And the reasoning behind that makes perfect sense to me. When you've got a substance that kills more people than several wars put together, you've got to ask, I think one of the statements was from the president was, name one bomb that's killed, 80,000 people. And that logic and that rationale works, makes sense. Great thing, stroke of a pen. Obviously, there's a bit of time lapse, as you've indicated, before that is implemented. Great move. I don't have a problem with that. But my concern is sort of circling back into the current issues. And the other sneaky one that's coming on the radar, which is a step back from what you've been achieving and your work of many of the advocates in the US have been achieving, is that underneath this radar, there's this now very real pending threat to reschedule marijuana from Schedule 1, putting it up there where it should be, because now we know the full extent of what cannabis can do, what marijuana can do, the harms that it inflicts, the short, long-term, intergenerational harms. I mean, the research has proven the last 20 years that it hasn't proven it to be a good plant, a good product. It's actually gone the other direction, proven it to be exactly what we've declared it to be for many decades. This is a highly toxic psychotropic toxin that does untold harm on multiple levels. But what he's going to do with the stroke of a pen is reschedule to Schedule 3. Now, let's talk about that. Because we spoke recently with, in a podcast, which will be released tomorrow, with Amy Romshausen from Drug Free American Foundation, and we had this conversation, and I quoted from High Times, which they actually came out saying, look, everyone thinks this is a great idea, but there's a lot of steps in this and what it can mean. So there's a lot going on here. Give us your take on this, Kevin, please. Yeah.
No, you're right. There is a lot going on. It's sometimes just with all of this, and we've been on nonstop media, and it's been totally crazy. I was actually looking forward to today because it's kind of a break from only talking about that. I was looking forward to what we're talking about now. Essentially, let me make it as succinct as I can. Marijuana. There will be an executive order that the president issues saying that it should be rescheduled. Now, he can't just deem it to be rescheduled. It has to go through a process. So he's going to say he wants it to happen, but it's already happening. It definitely though sends a signal, a very strong one, to the Attorney General to get this done. What would that do? Well, number one, we know what it would do. We know what it would do, but we're not sure about other things it would do. One of the things it would do is give tax breaks to the marijuana industry, which I think is a really bad idea. We don't want to make them more profitable than they already are. That's terrible. The other thing we know it would do is give signals that marijuana is less harmful than we thought it was, even though it's more harmful than we thought it was. So it really sends a bad message, because the headline is, marijuana rescheduled or marijuana reclassified to less dangerous substance. I mean, that is totally the opposite of where the science is. Okay. What we don't know, though, is what it really means for policy, because Schedule 3 drugs in the United States are things like Tylenol with codeine. Tylenol with codeine cannot make claims about cancer. It cannot make any claims not approved by the FDA. It cannot be infused in candies or vapes or anything like that. And so the issue is, we don't really like it. It's just it's very unknown what actually will happen if this ends up going through. But we do know the signal it will send and the tax breaks it will allow. That's why we're opposing it. One of the presumed reasons is for research, but there's been almost $5 billion spent on research in marijuana in the last 30 years. So it's not about research. It's just what they want to kind of say so that it passes muster with people.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Dave Evans is a barrister and who operates Civil, SCIVEL. We had him on our podcast about 6-8 months ago, and we talked about it because he's doing litigating against the cannabis industry on a number of different levels because of the harms done to communities and getting traction legally, which is really great. But he made a comment which is fascinating, and I think I want to bring that to the table. He said the only new medicine brought to the marketplace was Epidiolex or Epidiolex, whatever you want to call it, by GW Pharma, now Jazz Pharmaceuticals. They spent $1.3 billion, I think, in 11 years developing this non-THC, CBD-based Dravet syndrome treating epileptic medicine, which is a fourth-line treatment, by the way. We can reiterate that. There are 3 others better than it. It has a 25% efficacy rate, so it's not totally useless. It's helpful in that context. But in all the research and the $5 billion you've already spoken of, and the hundreds of thousands of research that have all failed to produce something new, we've got one new medicine. Now, that was done whilst cannabis was still at Schedule 1. So it doesn't need to be rescheduled to have this development done. It doesn't need to be. So again, you really hit the 2 big issues. And I want to reiterate this. It's all about public perception. The idea is that the bad actors in the culture, they leverage these mechanisms of rescheduling. It's not as bad. It's seriously, no. It is a good medicine. Look, it's not the poison that everyone's telling you it is. So again, that sends a clear signal, particularly to the willfully ignorant, and they just want to continue to propagate that. But of course, the tax breaks. And this is a huge issue. Again, we feed, or the potential to feed, the addiction for profit sector with greater capacity to generate wealth and to invest that back into addiction for profit enterprises. Now, this is just bad public health practice. It's just a bad idea. And thank you that Sam is, and amongst others, including Drug Free America Foundation and other groups, are really pushing back hard against this. And of course, everything that happens in the US has a trickle effect. It starts, the bad actors in our culture say, oh, see what America's done, see what President Trump has done, blah, blah, blah. And the thing that bothers me most about this is that kind of these two things are overlapping, and I wonder. Now, I don't know, so I'm going to throw out a Shane Varcoe rant here. I'm wondering if this fentanyl weapons of mass destruction thing, which we don't have a problem with, I'm not here to criticise it, but that's kind of, if that lays over this other one, it can bury it, and this rescheduling can disappear underneath this massive drop, which has got a lot of traction globally. We see the boats being, sunk in the Caribbean, and so that's constant news feed. We're getting that here. So I wonder, I'm cynically saying that this is kind of a multiple sort of layer thing, but I want our listeners to really get this and actually reflect on this and talk about this, because I think this is, again, one of the cons that the Trojan horse operators use constantly. Be educated, people. Be educated on this. This is not conspiracy theory. This is the game, and it's insidious, and it's malicious, and it's predictable. But if you don't see it coming, you get done by it, like sadly the Greeks did with the Trojans. Anyway, I digress. I'm having my moment here. Anyway, let's get to some more positive things. Now, to your new book, Kevin, and this is one of the reasons we want to get you on, this remarkable new book, One Nation Under the Influence, America's Drug Habit and How We Can Overcome It. Now, a couple of decades ago, just for the sake of context here, J. Vincent Peterson released a shocking expose, A Nation Under the Influence, America's Addiction to Alcohol. I'm going to read you just a short excerpt from this because it's going to help us lead into what Kevin's done and his work and how important and amplifying this is. So just a snapshot from the book. The book argues that the United States is deeply and systematically shaped by alcohol, treating it as a socially acceptable but highly destructive drug that affects health, families, economics, and public policy on a national scale. It frames the US as a culture under the influence where alcohol use is normalised despite the extensive evidence of harm and addiction patterns. The book critiques US alcohol policy as fragmented and heavily influenced by industry, calling for a shift from individual blame to population-level prevention and regulation. It emphasises education, early intervention, community-based prevention, evidence-informed treatment services as necessary to reduce the alcohol-related harm. Now, that's that excerpt from that book. Big Weed, as you've been crowing from the rooftops for 10 years, Big Weed is using the big alcohol, you call it big alcohol 2.0, they're using the same playbook.
Yeah.
So walk us through this fantastic research, The One Nation Under the Influence, America's Drug Habit, and how we can overcome it. Talk about some of the really key issues here, because you're not just talking about weed, but weed's a key element of that. Give us some really, really juicy insights from the book, Kevin, for our listeners.
Sure. I mean, so essentially, the book argues that we know what works. It's just a matter of implementing it and having the will to do it. Some people think the problem is so bad that it's easy to get very hopeless about it. And it's easy to say there's nothing that works. And so we should just legalize drugs or accept drug use or whatever, manage it. And it talks about how, first of all, there's no such thing as safe drug use or managing it at all.
Brilliant.
And then it talks about how the original harm reduction, which was really about AIDS, when AIDS was a real disease. I mean, AIDS now is more or less eradicated in most of the world. But when it was a death sentence, the need for harm reduction, but then how that's been really usurped by people with other intents to legalize drugs. But it talks about solutions. So it goes to Iceland and talks about the prevention solutions there. I set the record straight on Portugal. They did not legalize drugs. And they have a very mixed bag. It's a very nuanced picture what's going on in Portugal. Yeah. I talk about programs that motivate people to get help, which really addictions, if you're going to call it a disease, it's the only disease where you can essentially bribe somebody to get better. I mean, I don't mean bribe, but I'm saying that to make a point.
Contingency management. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
Contingency management.
And you can't do that with Alzheimer's. I can't tell my 95-year-old grandmother that if you don't remember my name tomorrow, I'm going to whatever. Or if you remember my name tomorrow, I'm going to give you $100. Like, that doesn't work. You can't tell someone with multiple sclerosis, don't have any MS spasms and then we'll give you money. I mean, it doesn't work that way. With addiction, it does work that way because it's really a bio-behavioural disorder. There's biological elements, but there's really this behavioral element that's so key. So it talks about that, and it talks about those real solutions and how we shouldn't get hopeless. And when we do get hopeless and we latch on to things like injection sites or prescribing opioids to heroin addicts and fentanyl addicts, that makes the problem a lot worse. And I talk about Vancouver, where I live, how that's just made it horrible, the problem, and et cetera, et cetera. So it goes on and on.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And Kevin's underselling the work, and I'm aware of Kevin's research, and certainly we've been following this and developing this for a long, long time. And Australia has been with the biggest, probably global exporter of bad harm reduction practices to the world. We were kind of the guys that sort of harnessed this and peddled it massively. And again, harm reduction has a place. We've never dismissed that. It has a place for those caught in the tyranny of addiction to help them perhaps potentially stay alive whilst they exit drug use. That is the key defining caveat on that particular statement. What we have seen, as you've just indicated, and we're going to reiterate this again, listeners, is that the pro-drug activists get underneath harm reduction, genuine harm reductionists who care about the drug user, who desperately want their family, their community members to get off drugs. They desperately want them to stay alive until they exit drug use, all those wonderful, compassionate things. And these people are genuine in their heart. They hate drugs, loathe drugs, want them out of their culture, but they want to engage this mechanism to help people stay alive while they exit. Now, the bad actors get underneath that, and they pretend to feign compassion and care. And yeah, this is important. Let's lift this. Pill testing's another one. It's classic. The pill testers, what they do, the drug testing at festivals, is they find a mum who's lost their daughter, and then they tell them, if only we had pill testing, your daughter would be alive. So they use that tragedy as a manipulative tool to justify another mechanism of so-called harm reduction, which actually equips and enables ongoing drug use. So again, we see all these narratives work, and Kevin's work is again, we ordered the book in. We're going to ask you to go online, engage with the resource, and purchase as many copies as you can and share it with your communities, because this is not just about marijuana. This is about drug policy, the bad use of drug policy. But again, I'm going to reiterate what Kevin has just masterfully said. It is more importantly about the proactive, protective factors that we can, with political will and community involvement, we can see happen. The community involvement that a 16-year-old boy in California stepped in and did all those years ago and made a significant difference in the culture. And we want to encourage our listeners to do the same. Get resources, get the research you need, and it's there. We've got it in spades, not just with Sam and with drug policy and groups that Kevin's involved with, but Delgado Institute and other groups in Australia. We've got evidence in spades on what not only is poor, bad practice, but more importantly, what is good and best practice, and how we can move forward as a community. Kevin, we're just going to close off. I know you got a lot going on, and thank you for taking the time today. You've been flat out with media. Really appreciate this. Last question, and it's a question we asked 95% of our guests. The fence or the ambulance? Which is the priority for you?
That's very good. Both. I'm going to be a politician.
Yep. No, good.
I just never think things are either or. Obviously, when there's an emergency, we need an ambulance there.
Correct.
But we also need a fence there to ensure that there's security and safety. So you really got to do both. And frankly, I would add to that, I would say, the classroom, because education and knowledge and realizing our worth as individuals and our soul, that is going to be the shortest route out of this issue.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, resiliency building, that's part of the protective factors at the top of the cliff. Build stronger fences, not prohibitive, keep you out fences, building strong, wonderful protective fences. And the bigger, the more fences you have at the top, the less ambulances you do need at the bottom. But yes, we don't want to eradicate the ambulance. We certainly want to eradicate the need for the ambulance. We don't want to eradicate the ambulance. So in this drug policy space, we can do that. And that's the Joseph Malone's poem that's famously on our website. It's been there since our inception of the latest iteration, Delgado Institute, The Fence or the Ambulance. Great poem. It was written in the 1930s. It's just spectacular. Read that. Kevin Sabet, again, I want to just reiterate his new book, latest book, and all his books are worth a read. All his books are worth engaging. Put them in your library, get them on your bookshelves, get them to policymakers and politicians as well. Very, very important, because this is global leading stuff. And the book, again, is One Nation Under the Influence, America's Drug Habit and How We Can Overcome It. It'll be in the links to that will be in the newsletter podcast, and it's going to be deployed in the next couple of weeks. And so again, Kevin Sabet, thank you for joining us today and taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks so much, Shane. It's an honor to be with you. Thanks for having me.
And for those listening, thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Unnecessary Harm podcast. And until next time, let's keep calling out the unnecessary harm and staying clear of it and helping others do the same. Until then, see ya.
As we wrap up today's session, remember, each step towards understanding is a step away from unnecessary harm. We're here to empower, inspire, and pave the way for optimal well-being. Stay resilient, stay informed, and continue being the change your community needs. Thank you for joining us at the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Until next time, take care and keep pushing forward.